Stars of the Night. Sadie, Martha, Lupita, Jesusita, La Hermandad de los Chiles. Sassy senoritas of starlit plazas, we miss you. You filled dark spaces with light glinting from your lanterns, oil-filled. Dusk and you descended on the Plaza de Armas to fill and serve with snapping dark eyes, quick hands, earthen platos steaming with chili stew, rojo sabroso, serving smiles with sides of tortillas, frijoles, filling countless tazas de café, chocolate, then refilling. You filled rough benches in war and peace, Las Reinas, Queens, letting all colors rub shoulders as you filled orders from cowhands, carters, consulars, cavalry, curious, touristas, all equal before waving adios and then refilling seats till dawn. You filled your bolsas, your purses, slowly, pennies, nickels, thin dimes, but you wavered not. You were quick to learn hard lessons in hard seasons to pass them on, knowing you had families to feed, bellies to fill. You filled Main Plaza with revelry and romance, stole hearts as you filled Andre's eyes and ears with illusions, gretas, ballads, strumming guitars. You led rowdy choruses with trail tunes too. The charm of your voices wove historias to keep seats filled. Lost chilly queens, we bid you, derma bien, sleep well. In earliest light from an overturned indigo bowl of sky, we feel your wrists sore from filling and refilling. We see your faces slump from gracious smiling. We wrap your reboses round to warm your arms, and we walk you home to sleep away the day. Las Reinas de Chile, so that tonight, otra vez, you can capture and refill our hearts. I'm an amateur historian. I have got to Texas as quick as I could, but it's only been about 21 years. So, and I live in Comfort, and I will always be an Auslander or a newcomer there. So thank you for your warm welcome here. I'm actually, it's a wonderful, friendly community too, but it's just kind of a joke then, unless you have ancestors that go back many decades. You'll be a newcomer. Yeah. So my talk tonight is really done in light of San Antonio's 300th anniversary, and it's going to focus mostly on the colorful chili queens, some of which you know about and some people don't know anything about them. So I'm going to share their history because I think it's a delightful part of San Antonio's past. And I'll also spend a little bit time talking about the historic plazas. So with that, let's continue. Two of my sources that I use, you may be familiar with. One of them is Lewis M. Fisher's award-winning book called Chili Queens, Hay Wagons, and Fandangos. A wonderful book full of a lot of plates that are nice, and I can pass that around. I also like this book called Chili Queen Memories, and it's by Marion Martinello, and it's a blend of historical fact, vintage photos, a lot of recipes, and maps, and music, folklore, etc. And she gives really good eyewitness accounts of the 1880s life on Military Plaza from people who lived it. You'll notice also in the right-hand corner and on most of my slides, you see a little paper pennant, more accurately known as papel picado, cut paper, and it is a chili queen. You can see San Fernando Cathedral on the right side, and there she is, serving chili con carne. This was not one of the sources I used. You may not be able to see it in the small print. It says, "Revenge of the Chili Queens, queen for a day, dead forever." I did not use that. Chili with an I versus chili with an E. Certainly the terms are often used interchangeably. You'll see them in cookbooks interchangeably across North America, but they didn't always mean the same thing. Chili powder, C-H-I-L-I, powder, is usually a blend of ground chili pods and other spices like cumin, peppercorn, salt, etc. Now chili powder, C-H-I-L-E, powder, most often refers to the pure ground chili pods with few or absolutely no additives. So, and really the only way to know what you have is to read the ingredients on the container. So, anyway, and of course chili with an E is the correct spelling in Spanish, and chili with an I is more typically the Americanized version. All right, so initially chili con carne meant meat with chili, and it evolved into just chili, oftentimes today widely accepted. But it was very different in the 1800s and early 1900s from what we consider chili con carne today. Typically the meat, which was a mix of beef and pork, wasn't minced, and there weren't any beans in it. And of course purists today in chili cook-offs still believe it. Chili should not have beans in it. So, in fact, it'll be interesting to see in the fiesta this year in honor of the tricentennial, there is a Chili Queens cook-off contest, and that's on April 22nd, a Sunday. Now, this is a little bit of an eccentric San Antonio event, kind of little offbeat. And it's a chili competition, of course, where there are tastings involved, but there's also a competition for what they call the Hoochie Award. And that could go to a man or a woman, whoever is the tackiest. So anyway, and they do note that the event is for adults 18 years old or older. Anyway, so much for that. So let's get on with our story. So, most accounts, of course, tell us that the arrival of the Canary Islanders in 1731 is considered the founding date of San Antonio. However, then that wouldn't make this year the tricentennial at all, because there was a sizable community in place when those islanders arrived, and there were soldiers at the Presidio. There was a local mestizo population that supported them, and they were around since 1718 when the first missions were established. So that's, of course, why the San Antonio 300th anniversary is being celebrated today. In this map, bird's eye view, you can see San Fernando Cathedral almost in the center, and you see Main Plaza, which is often called Plaza de Isa, and you see Military Plaza, Plaza de Armas, with the cathedral sandwiched between. And of course those were the main public grounds of San Antonio in the 1850s to up until the City Hall was built in the 1890s. So we're going to focus on life in those plazas. Really, in terms of Military Plaza, Plaza de Armas, the only visible evidence of the Spanish garrison that was built there in the 1720s is the Presidio Captain's residence. And it's now what is known as the Spanish Governor's Palace, and some of you may have toured that or seen that when you were in San Antonio. So San Fernando Cathedral, there, our centerpiece, was begun in 1738, completed in 1749, about 11 years later, standing between those two plazas. And of course, it's the oldest parish church building in Texas and the site of the earliest marked graves in San Antonio. So 3 of the original walls were started by the Canary Islanders in about 1738, and they can still be seen. Other major events that occurred on and around the Plaza de Armas, main plaza, and Plaza de Isla, military, were Apache leaders, Spanish officials, held a treaty ceremony here. Have any of you heard about that? Yep. And they actually buried a hatchet. And you hear that expression, bury the hatchet. There was a lance and arrows and a live horse also buried. So anyway, that's kind of fun.
Really?
To know. Well, I don't know about the horse.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's an interesting little, what I meant was kind of a little interesting tidbit. So the military plaza appeared to have lost its really strong military presence in the late 18th, early 19th century, but its importance in San Antonio's history continued. And there were, quote, chili queens, women, young women, girls, who did even serve the soldiers in the early 1800s. So that is known. The parade grounds at Military Plaza, of course, are well known. But it did become, after the Civil War, probably one of the liveliest spots in the entire state. So cowboys, rangers, vaqueros, travelers, consuladors, anybody traveling through San Antonio would come there to obtain the local news. But an outdoor market that was bustling then and continued to be. So in the evening is when it came alive, and we'll talk about that. Here's one of the famous Onderdonk paintings of Chili Queens at the Alamo, and that's at the Whitty. This one you can see is the rear of the cathedral with vendors set up, and this shows it lighter, so this would be in the very early evening or summer when it was still light. And these two photos show the open air day market on Military Plaza in front of the cathedral. So it was vegetable market by day, hay market also, but the plazas changed character as dusk began. And the beginning of the Chili Queen's story starts with this quote: "It all began on the plaza that never slept, my favorite place in the whole of the city. In daytime, most people on San Antonio's Plaza de Armas, Military Plaza, were selling or shopping, but after sundown they came to have a good time." So that's how Marion Martinello begins her conjuring of the often forgotten world of the 19th century San Antonio Chili Queens. And there were tropical birds sold, and candies, and vegetables, and all kinds of things going on. Here's a stereotypon image of chili con carne tables, and that would have been around 1880, and the decade of the 1880s was probably the biggest decade for the Chili Queens in terms of popularity. I read an account that said there were actually hundreds of Chili Queens and tables, hundreds, and thousands of people would be there on a night. That's amazing, if you think about that. Frontier magazine, Frontier Times magazine in 1927, and San Antonio Commissioner Bushwick reminisced about it, their origin before they moved to the Market Square, and he said a lot about them that was interesting, and of course, he noted that they all liked to joke and banter, flirt a little bit with the customers, but they were very well chaperoned by the family members and who guarded their virtue. And they had backup, of course, from the men in the family who, with wagons and carts, would bring at dusk the chili to the plazas. There would be open fires, and you can see the trestles with the boards set up for the tables, and then tin lanterns decorating them, and cruets of vinegar and the spices, of course, that you might use. So both of those are pictures of the chili stands, if you were. And these are the open air ones, of course. And here's a chili stand in Haymarket Plaza. Haymarket Plaza is on the other side of the marketplace today in downtown San Antonio. So kind of where that building is, where you can get a lot of trinkets and memorabilia, that type of thing. That's about where Haymarket Plaza was. And of course it was named because hay was sold there. And there you see again workers and some kids sitting there on a bench in front of some of the early stores. And there you can see a better picture of the lanterns, the condiments, the seasonings. And of course there were things other than just a bowl of chili that were sold. Frijoles, tamales, enchiladas, chili rellenos, menudo, carnitas, depending upon the stand, of course. And in addition to coffee, hot chocolate was often served. But there was a lot of competition between the chili purveyors and who would be the chili queen and so forth. So there you see the guys are kind of looking at the stand there. But they will fade into the background as dusk appears and the chili queens take prominence, if you will. And we see a couple more pictures. And what is interesting is the leveling of society on the plazas. It didn't matter if you were dusty and coming off the cattle trail, or you were an attorney in a silk hat and starched collar. Classes were leveled at the chili stand.
That's also Cotula, how he originally spelled his name. Who Cotula's name for?
The K-O-T-U-L. Okay, yeah. Variety of types of people at the stands.
Now, did they do this every night?
Every night.
They would put the six stands up and then take them down?
That's correct. Yeah, it wasn't just certain days of the week. In the Chili Queen story, and this, you can actually see some photographs too, there were often candy makers around, and they typically would stay around at night too, so it could have a sweet. Here's one on a picture postcard. They were helpful. What he has in his hand is a fly swatter of the day to keep the flies away from those sweets. And let's take a look at some of the better known chili queens. There were a few women who achieved some degree of fame. One of them was Sadie Thornhill on the left there. She was an Anglo-Celtic chili queen. And that photo is taken in the late 1880s. She always wore flowers in her hair. It is said that she plucked one of her flowers and gave it to the short story writer O. Henry, and he writes about that. And she always worked Military Plaza. They went home at dawn. So they set up at dusk, went home at dawn. Hard-working ladies. In the last big Chili Queen decade, which would have been the 30s, in 1930s, Lydia Mendoza, who was a very early Queen of Tejano music, got her start singing as a Chili Queen. And so a number of them, to attract customers to the stands, sang, played guitar, did other kinds of things as entrepreneurs to garner their market share. Because many of them were supporting families. And it was really a whole family enterprise. I have a very good friend in Comfort who is will be 101 in June. And she remembers going to the chili stands. Have any of you ever heard of any of your family participating?
But Lydia Mendoza would come here and sing at the Casillas dance hall.
Great.
Oh, at the Casillas here in
Yes,
in
when I was a
Somerset?
little girl, I remember.
Oh,
That was a
wonderful.
big attraction here.
What have you heard from your family in the chili stands?
And not, the chili stands, I didn't hear anything.
Okay. Anyone?
We were country people and we
Yeah.
stayed in the country.
Yeah. Well, this gal that I talked to was a teenager when she went. So, but she remembers it as being quite fun. So this is what, in 1894, this little clip, the ever attentive and always jolly Chili Queen. They are good fellows, these Chili Queens, and are able and willing to talk on any subject that may be named, from love to law. As a general rule, they are bright, bewitching creatures, and they put themselves to much trouble to please their often rowdy customers. So that's what Frank Bushek wrote about them. And there you see a jolly Chili Queen. She had raven hair and sparkling eyes with a smile, and with a toss of her head, she makes you think of Carmen. She is out in all her glory in peacock feathers tonight, not in that drawing. But anyway, that's what Frank Bushek said about her. And he said that, here again, the Chili Queen catered to hundreds, the Chili Queen themselves numbered in the hundreds, the patrons thousands. So anyway, drawing Spanish minstrels and the strange piquant Mexican dishes served at 100 competing tables. Crowds thronged the Alamo Plaza all night. So now back to where we were. So into the 20th century. Now we're getting into the 30s, the late 30s, possibly even the 40s. So what happened? Well, the public spaces were redeveloped. We've heard that before. And they were landscaped and they were regulated more and more from the early 20th century on. And in that, during those decades, the Chili Queen slowly died out. Now, the city government would cite things like open fires, danger, open air cooking, music as hazards. Right.
Music, evil.
So by 1936, the Chili Queens were put mostly in screened off tents. And this is a tent that you can see in the background. So they were brought out of the open air into tents. Music, in this account, says it was silence, but I don't think so based on that photo. They were playing music, but eventually they're going to disappear shortly after this photo. And then the brick and mortar type of restaurant, such as La Fonda, arrived. Okay, so here we have Chili Queens at Haymarket Plaza in the 1930s. So, does look like we're having a good time, I think. Pretty good crowd. Look like they're having fun. So here now we're up to the end of an era. So this Lucy Trevino, she's holding a 130 or 140-year-old pot. She wasn't sure exactly how old it was, but she donated it during World War II to the scrap metal pile. And it was a pot used by her mother in the first Mexican restaurant, a Fonda, in San Antonio, when they had to be brought indoors. And then in the middle photograph are the Garcia sisters, and they're working in an indoor cafe also. They were judged to be the best. They, along with their mother, were forced to close their stand. And then as the type down there says, by 1943, writer Frank Jennings in San Antonio, The Story of an Enchanted City, notes that the last remaining Chili's stands were shut down entirely because health authorities objected to their dishwashing facilities. And then over on the right, what you see is the Chili Queens having to display their health cards. And that was when the Chili Queens were put into this one central kitchen in the market house, kind of in the La Villita area. So a research article written about 10 years ago posed the question, and I think it's a fair one. Who chased out the Chili Queens? Was it gender, race, urban reform, or some combination? And I think probably a combination. I think all of those were a factor. So the San Antonio Light published that paragraph down below. Recent action of the City Health Department ordered the removal of the Haymarket Square of Chili Queens, and they were the last ones because when the big red City Hall was built, that closed a lot of the military and main plazas. So, as it says, the Chili Queens made their first appearance a couple centuries back when a group of Spanish soldiers camped on what is now City Hall site and gave the place the name Military Plaza. So at one time the Chili Queens had stands on Military, Haymarket, and Alamo plazas, but then they were confined. So they were dethroned supposedly in 1937, but they still lived on. They were restored by San Antonio Mayor Maury Maverick in 1939. So they had a little finale, if you will, a little, we clapped loud enough and they got to come back. Anyway, so the stands though were closed again shortly after the start of World War II. So that's in the last days. But you've got to remember that they really became these families, these gals, with their fiery hot serpent chili that bited the tongue, were the forerunners of a nationwide Mexican and Tex-Mex food industries. Think of Pace Picante sauce starting in San Antonio, Frito-Lays, some of the spice companies. So all came from the origins of these ladies. So they do live on. And I thought I would help them live on with one of the original recipes. The recommendation is that you make it a day in advance, so that the flavors really meld. You know, all the chili cook-offs all over started with these young ladies. But I think it's a very colorful part of San Antonio history, and one to tell people if you are walking around the plazas. and the downtown area of San Antonio, because few people know of our whole story.
Do you